John Muir is a patron saint of environmentalism, an epic figure whose writings of mystical enlightenment attained during lone treks in California's wilderness glorified individualism, saved Yosemite, and helped establish the national park system. Louis Sagan. In the late 1800s, the land of the Sierra Valley in California was threatened with destruction due to overgrazing, forestry, and tourism. John Muir took the lead in writing letters and articles to convince the public to support conservation and protection of the area. Muir created the Sierra Club, which continues to advocate for wildlife protection all over the United States, and left a legacy of public awareness which continues to inspire others. John Muir was born in Scotland and moved to America in 1849. He went to the University of Wisconsin. He was originally interested in mechanical things, but suffered an injury to the eye when using a machine that he had built. This experience changed his life forever. From this moment on, nature became his passion. After this, he started traveling the country. He experienced nature and kept journals of his findings. Eventually, he came to the Yosemite Valley in California. The Yosemite Valley had become popular in the mid-19th century as a tourist destination. The valley floor had become populated with buildings. The people who lived there grazed their livestock in the valley. This led to the destruction of the land. Muir saw this and was appalled, calling the sheep hooved locusts. The Yosemite Valley wasn't the only natural place being threatened with industrialization. Beautiful vistas, such as the Grand Canyon, Dinosaur Valley, and Hetch Hetchy, were faced with destruction by damming, forestry, and civilization. Muir saw this and felt the need to do something. Muir also wanted to change the way that we looked at nature. Instead of a place to be used for our own benefit, it would be a place to visit and be inspired by. Muir led the conservation crusade of the late 1800s through various methods. He created partnerships with influential people of the day, wrote letters, and articles. One of Muir's most famous partnerships is that which he had with President Theodore Roosevelt. He famously took Roosevelt on a trip to Yosemite. He showed the president the beauty of the land and convinced him that the land was worth saving. From this trip, Muir gained an important ally. Roosevelt would go on to create many bills encouraging conservation. He now had someone to back his efforts in Washington. Muir also formed allies in the Senate. He wrote letters to congressmen such as William C. Hendricks in an effort to convince them to support his cause. He told them about the threats facing nature and told them what he thought should be done about it. Some of his best friends, such as Robert Underwood Johnson and John Burroughs was also a friend of Roosevelt, worked in the newspaper business. Muir showed these men Yosemite. He showed them the overgrazing and logging. He demonstrated to them how the wild places were being threatened and showed them why they needed to be protected. Together they started upon a campaign to save Yosemite. Muir would write articles about conservation, and Robert Underwood Johnson would publish them in his newspaper. The team worked to convince the public that Yosemite was worth saving. Eventually, Yosemite became a state park. The park was smaller than the national park is today. It didn't contain the valley, which is now the most famous part of Yosemite. This was obviously not enough for Muir. He wanted the land around the state park to be combined with the land that was already protected. This would then be turned into a national park. Muir and his team continued to advocate for this, and Yosemite National Park was created in 1906. Not all of Muir's conservation attempts were successful, however. Muir was incredibly fond of a part of the Sierra Valley called Hetch Hetchy. He believed that this area was even more beautiful than the Yosemite Valley, and it was being threatened. The valley was going to be dammed to create a reservoir to provide water for the San Francisco area. A bill had been brought forth in an attempt to save the valley, but it had already failed. Muir tried to reintroduce the bill. He wrote a letter in an attempt to convince the public to save Hetch Hetchy. He encouraged the public to ask Congress to reject this destructive bill. Muir, however, was unsuccessful. But, in a testament to Muir's power, there was huge public outcry over the destruction of nature. Most of Muir's conservation attempts were successful, though. He succeeded in stopping both Dinosaur Valley and the Grand Canyon from being dammed. In 1896, President Grover Cleveland created a government forestry commission to investigate the western forests. Muir was chosen to go along with the commission when they went out on their investigations. The reports published by the commission convinced the president to set aside over 21 million acres of land to be protected. Muir's actions helped preserve Sequoia, Mount Rainier, and the Grand Canyon National Parks. Muir's legacy is spread across many aspects, from the land he saved to the people that he inspired. One of the most prolific parts of his legacy is the creation of the Sierra Club. The Sierra Club was formed by Muir as a club of people who enjoyed exploring the Sierra Valley in 1892. Muir eventually convinced the club to become more politically active in conservation. When Yosemite was threatened with the possibility of being made smaller, the club worked to save the park. This was one of their first major successes. The club also opposed the damming of natural places and lobbied to prevent grazing. The club helped protect such famous places as the Grand Canyon, the Great Lakes, the Florida Everglades, and the Alaskan forests. The club used methods such as lobbying, research, organizing demonstrations, producing congressional testimony, filing lawsuits, and monitoring state and federal legislation to achieve the protection of natural places in America. The club is still around today, working to continue Muir's legacy, with its goals being stated as to explore and enjoy the wild places on Earth, to promote responsible use of the planet's ecosystems and resources, and to educate people in the protection and restoration of the environment. Muir's legacy, however, goes beyond the physical. Muir's writings and his attitude toward nature influenced the world in many ways. He saw nature as a sacred place, a place made by God where you could feel in tune with the world. He believed that the land should be preserved for the sake of being inspired by it. Muir freed himself, then generations of disciples, from the venerated tradition of adapting land to human needs, urging instead for a new ethic of adapting human behavior towards preserving the natural state of the earth. He intensely advocated to preserve them for themselves beyond any idea of economic use or function. And most of all, Muir changed the way that we look at open spaces.